What challenges are associated with using real-world data?
When people hear the word research, right, they tend to assume that it's an investigational drug. They tend to think when they hear the word research, they think, oh, it's a new drug, or we're testing it. We don't know if it works or not. We don't know if it's safe or not. We don't know if it actually makes sense for patients or not. That indeed is research, but research is so much more than that. That particular bucket of investigational trials, new trials, that is an important part of research, and most work happening at cancer centers does focus on that kind of research, what we call phase 1 trials, phase 2 trials, phase 3 trials. Those are all prospectives, meaning that we follow patients, we enroll them in a trial, and follow them prospectively. Not all prospective trials are interventional or pharmacologic. For example, when I was a fellow, when I was a trainee, the big project that got me interested in myeloma to begin with was digital life coaching during transplant for myeloma. And that's a good example of research where we actually randomly assign patients receiving transplant to either get usual care with some handouts about how to stay well and how to feel well and rebuild their lives after transplant, or we did that, plus we gave them access to a life coach by phone or text who could help them with sleeping, with moving, with feeling just less stressed about returning to work after transplant. That's research too. Even though there's no drugs involved, nothing is changing about the transplant itself or the myeloma itself. That absolutely is prospective research. I have colleagues, for example, Dr. Urvi Shah at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York, who's doing prospective research around gut microbiome, seeing how people's gut bacteria changes over time and what that means for them in terms of myeloma precursor conditions. So not all research needs to involve new drugs. Also, there can be trials, prospective trials of research of drugs that are already approved, using them in different ways. A good example of that would be CAR T therapy. CAR T therapy is approved in the US as of the day that I'm filming this, April 5th. The FDA has just approved one kind of CAR T for 2 prior lines and not 4 prior lines of therapy. So patients earlier in the myeloma journey. That trial that led to that approval was an example of research. Even though the drug is already approved, it's not approved in that line of therapy. That's also prospective research. Then, if you go this big picture, separately from prospective research, there are other kinds of research as well. So there's retrospective research. So for example, what I alluded to earlier, if you go back and look at people's medical records and say, look, for everyone diagnosed with myeloma in the year 2021, how did they do? Or if we look at their dexamethasone dosing, or look at their acyclovir dosing, what changed about it? And that's retrospective research, meaning that we already have a question in mind. We're not going to enroll patients in a trial. We're going to look back and what happened to these patients, over the last 2 years, 3 years, et cetera, and make conclusions based on that. Retrospective research is not as strong as prospective research. Obviously, ideally, we should run trials for the big questions in myeloma, but as we'll talk about, there are some cases where real-world data, which often is retrospective by definition, is very useful in that regard. And I would say there's a third bucket of research, which is health services research or cross-sectional research. So I've also done work with HealthTree and with other organizations for survey-based research. Survey research is kind of in the middle somewhere, where it's not really retrospective because you are asking a patient to donate their time and physically answer these survey questions in front of you. It's not always prospective. We're not always following them over time. Right now, for example, with HealthTree, we have a survey ongoing of eye health with myeloma, alluding to my earlier retrospective question with dexamethasone and eye complications in myeloma. This is a one-time survey. Could a survey be research? Absolutely. It doesn't have to be, right? If you're surveyed about how was your experience with your doctor for a quality survey in terms of what could be better, that's also a survey, but that's not research. When I say research, I mean that we're using it to improve care, improve outcomes for our patients. So if I'm using that survey not just to make myself feel better, or not just to make my practice better, but actually to make myeloma care paradigms better for patients, then it's research.